Well, today we've got kind of a fun twist on our podcast. We're doing a crossover episode. One of those things where you get another podcast on your podcast, and we're going to be a podcast on their podcast. So there's going to be all sorts of podcasting going on today. And today our special crossover podcast guests are the leaders of Talking Technology with ATLIS, which is the Association of Technology Leaders in Independent Schools. So that, as if Bob and I talk about how two of us is sometimes too much. Well, maybe it's I'm too much and then Bob is still there. But they actually have three co-hosts on this show. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And Christina, let's start with you. You kind of run the show on the podcast.
Well, at least they let me think that, Alex. I don't know if I actually do, but I am indeed Christina Lewellen. I'm the Executive Director of the Association of Technology Leaders in Independent Schools, and I am one of the co-hosts of Talking Technology with ATLIS. Excellent.
Hey, Hiram, share a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. So I'm Hiram Cuevas, the Director of Information Systems and Academic Technology at St. Christopher's School in Richmond, Virginia.
Excellent. And I wanted Bill to go last because he usually finds a way to go first. So, Bill.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Bill Stites, and I am the Director of Technology at Montclair Kimberley Academy in Montclair, New Jersey.
Well, I know all of us, and except for Bob, have plenty to say. So what do you say we go ahead and kick this episode off and get it underway?
Let's do it. So this is an exciting day. We get this opportunity to come together. We're doing a crossover episode. So if there isn't anything that can make you feel more official in podcasting than a crossover episode, I don't even know what we're doing with our lives. This is really exciting because we're here with the co-hosts of Learning Through Technology and the co-hosts of Talking Technology, that is a podcast hosted by ATLIS. So hello, everyone. Here we go. It's time. Let's cross over. Let's start with, I know, right? Let's start with a conversation about what we've all learned, because I think that we have come into this space, all of us, fairly recently. So Bill and Hiram and I had this idea to launch a podcast for ATLIS because we really wanted to have a more regular interface with our community and be able to address topics as they were coming up without waiting 6 months for a magazine or 12 months for a conference. And you guys have been on the scene for a few months now too, with Learning Through Technology, which is an STS education podcast. So this is exciting. Let's all talk a little bit about what we've learned so far. And is podcasting what you expected when you got into it? Bob, Alex, do you guys want to go first with yours?
This doesn't count as you letting me have one, Alex, because you actually spoke first, as usual. So for those of you keeping score at home, that's one for Alex. So I'm the engineer of the two of us, and I came at this a bit more reluctantly than Alex will say politely. But what I've learned is we've had several episodes that have not really centered around technology at all. They have centered around equity, diversity, some conversations about teacher burnout. Some touch on technology, but we've had many that haven't centered around technology. And those seem to be the podcasts that we get the most comments on, or at least I hear the most comments on. So that's been surprising to me. I thought we were going to talk ones and zeros like the name says, but we really have been, we've been interested in all things, education with a little emphasis on technology, I guess. Okay, Alex, it's your turn.
We were thinking about how do we want to share all the experience that we had in our company. And so somebody, I think they were more joking than anything else, said, you guys should do a podcast and it should be Bob and Alex doing the podcast. And Bob and I are pretty different from one another just in terms of our style and our affect. But the reality is we both are truly committed to K-12 ed tech, right? And we've committed our careers to it. And so when we started this, we actually thought that we would only get 3 listeners, which would be, our parents. And so we, now we've got this thing out there and, we're getting hundreds of listens every single day, which is crazy to us. I don't know who listens to this thing, but it's awesome to get it out there and people that we didn't know we're listening, send us messages and say, hey, gosh, that was a great episode on your latest podcast. And so I guess some folks are listening and it's kind of working.
Yeah, I love that. We also found that while we are a technology focused organization in the independent school space, our topics are pretty wide ranging as well, right? So we sort of think of our podcast generally. Sometimes we get into the nuts and bolts of a solution, but then other times we're just celebrating leaders in our space. And that's just as interesting and cool as the nuts and bolts stuff too. So it's been fun. Bill and Hiram, has it been what you guys expected when I kind of dragged you in? Not really kicking and screaming.
I was looking for two things most of all. I was looking for an opportunity to hear myself talk more often, and I was looking forward to an opportunity to spend more time annoying Hiram, which I think both have been accomplished through the use of the podcast.
Oh, wow. Like you needed a podcast to annoy Hiram.
But no, I think one of the biggest things that drew me to doing this was one of the things that, as Christina kind of mentioned earlier, was the community. I always appreciate it more so than anything else, the conversations that we've had at the conferences over the years. And Alex, Hiram, and I mean, we've been running that circuit for quite a while, and it was always the most. To me, it was always the most important thing about getting together. It was getting to know the community, getting to share out to the community. I think, after 30 years here at MKA, I've taken so much from the community. I was looking for an opportunity to have conversations to give back to the community. And I think that's really been the biggest thing. And the one thing I would also add is that, for somebody who does like to talk a lot, doing this, making this work, keeping this conversation going is not as easy as it seems. And I learned that during one of the episodes where I had to kind of wrangle an API conversation. And I've said ever since then, I appreciate Christina in new ways every time I went through that, because she does this so masterfully that it makes it look easy. And it's definitely not. It's not just showing up and talking. It's showing up and figuring out how to keep the flow going and asking the right questions and stopping me from talking, which he probably needs to do right about now, so that other people can actually get their input in. So that it's really been giving back and having those conversations with that community. That's been one of the biggest things for me at this point.
And I would say here to what everything Bill said, and I could just be quiet because Bill said so much. But as dissimilar as Alex and Bob claim to be and claim that they are to each other, Bill and I are actually very, very similar, which is quite frightening in and of itself. We have the same interests. We like the same music, the same movies, same podcasts. And we have this strong desire to assist in this space. And one of the things that I found most interesting about doing the podcast is, yes, it is entirely much more difficult than one would ever expect. It's kind of like when rendering DVDs for the first time for your school was a thing, and people say, "Oh, can you make this change?" Like, I've already rendered this. This is a lot of work to produce all of this. But it's an opportunity for me to not only give back, but I leave every episode excited because I've learned something new every single time we conduct one of these. And I remember the first episode that Alex and Bob put together with Mary Beth. I listened to that, and I ended up listening to that one 3 times because it was so good on the work that she was doing. So this is wonderful. This is the DC to my Marvel. This is the Star Trek to my Star Wars.
All right, Bob, I get to be Marvel if we're the DC and Marvel thing. It is a lot of work to get this out the door. I think, like you said, Bill and Hiram, it's more than most people think. But as Hiram, as you were saying, the characters that we get to meet, the people that we get to meet and hear their stories, it always, every time, even when we're interviewing somebody that I know, I pick up a nugget that just changes my perspective, and it just kind of makes my job and life a little bit better. It's great.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Bill. I think that your perspective of me kind of herding cats or wrangling cattle, whatever it is. I have my career started in journalism, and so I don't think I ever lost my deeply inquisitive nature. And so this format really suits me because I get to bring out questions. And kind of like probe and kind of get to the heart of matters when I'm, let's say in an ATLIS board meeting or if I'm writing for the magazine. But it doesn't always, I don't get to play with that tool in my toolbox every day. And so the podcast has been really cool and exciting. And so one of the questions that I have for you guys is then, so you've been doing this for a little while. So I'd love to kind of go around the horn and talk about which of the episodes you've done so far has been the biggest aha. Like you say, you're learning new things and you're enjoying the process. I certainly am too. But for me, I'll just kind of start by saying that we had the opportunity to interview the 3 founders of ATLIS. And, for those listeners who maybe in this crossover experiment don't know ATLIS very well, we're not even 10 years old as an organization. And so our 3 founders got together 8 or 9 years ago, almost 10 years ago, and said, the technology people who are serving independent schools, K-12 education, don't really have a home. And so we think they should have a home. We think that this industry and this expertise is becoming finite and distinct enough that there needs to be conversations around these issues because it's really an aspect of leadership for the schools that are doing it really well. And it's a point of competitive differentiation for the schools that are doing it well. And so our founders got together, formed ATLIS, started with an event that people will still brag if they were at the first one. How many of you guys were at the first one, by the way? Nope, not Bill, not Hiram, not Alex. Oh my gosh. Well, okay. See, I wasn't there either. So I guess we're all not at the first one. But people who are very proud of that, just so you understand. I should get like badges or something made up. I was at the first ATLIS conference. But what was cool is that they have now since moved into other spaces of serving the independent school industry. They are not involved in the leadership of ATLIS anymore because that was always their goal, like hand it off, create a strong board of wonderful leaders, get a strong staff passionate about the mission. So they've moved on, but they're still around. And so we interviewed them for our podcast and we kind of got the ATLIS origin story. And maybe not every listener will be excited about that. But for me in particular, it's such a creative and cool and unique opportunity to have like a direct connection with the people who started the organization now that I have the reins as the executive director. And now that I'm leading it into the future with my incredible board and my really passionate staff, to have that direct connection to the people who actually saw fit to start this is really cool. So my favorite episode so far has been interviewing the founders. I feel like we'll keep that forever. And it's really neat to hear in their own words why they did this.
That's awesome. And I was a member of the National Association of Independent Schools Technology Task Force, which no longer exists. It existed because there was no ATLIS, right? And so it was a task force that became a standing committee, like way too many task force do, and especially in independent schools. And the 3 founders came in and requested to that task force that they be given not permission, because they didn't need NAS's permission, but they sort of asked for like a blessing to sort of get that going, right? And so even though I wasn't at the first conference, I was there to sort of see that genesis come about. There you go. I was part of the origin story, the Marvel origin story, Bob. So I have 2 favorite episodes, so I'll cover them quickly. The first is obviously when Bob interviewed me and I got to be guest and co-host. That was clearly an outstanding episode. As Bill says, I got to hear lots of my self-talk, which was actually the reason it's one of my favorite episodes is not because of the guest, but because of the host. When I was in the seat of the guest, I've only done one episode like that where Bob interviewed me. When I was in the seat of the guest, Bob really ran the show, and it was quite masterful. And so for a guy who always says, hey, I'm an engineer and I don't belong being here and all that kind of stuff. He was really remarkable. And I thought it was a high quality interview because of the host. That was great. There you go, Bob. You got a public pat on the back that you deeply, deeply deserve. The second one was my second favorite episode was, I think, Talisa Dixon, a superintendent in Columbus Public City Schools. And I know this kind of audience is really more kind of geared towards the independent schools, but I thought one of the most, the reason I like that one so much, there's so much going on in schools today, particularly public schools, that can be bad. And her entire demeanor, outlook, recommendation, focus was all on community working together to solve problems. And if we just focus on the community first, so many of these problems just instantly go away and we can start to make real positive changes. And it was just it was so uplifting and not at all what I expected the episode to be. And I think that those are the best kinds when you come in with a thought about where you're going to go with it, and where it goes is so much better than what you could have possibly imagined or planned.
All right. I have to follow up Alex now. One, I called him a visionary in our podcast, which reluctantly was true. The thing that Alex foresaw that many people didn't is amazing. You got it, Alex. I do appreciate the kind words. I would say I couldn't pick out a single episode because it's all been learning for me. I could tell just in this time that we've spoken together that you're all very comfortable with people, and I'm not. Alex will tell you I'm not. This is the last place I want to be, is behind a microphone or in front of an audience. So it's been a journey for me to learn to become. I love asking questions. So I have loved our conversations. We have had some outstanding guests. Maybe Alex is the best one, maybe not, but we've had some outstanding guests, but I've learned along the way my part and how I can contribute. But it's just remarkable the quality of people that work to educate our kids. And I think the small part that we can bring, and there actually are people who listen to us that aren't just our parents or my daughter, that get to hear their stories and what they're doing, not just the technical, not just about AI or esports, but the people they are, the challenges they've faced, the way they got to where they're at, and how they keep moving forward. That's really been my favorite part of all of them.
One of the things I'm as we're talking, I'm looking at like the list of guests that we've had, and it's like we're at our Sweet 16, and it's given the time of year we're doing this, it's a nice number for the month of March. But it's one of those things you don't want to pick, from any of your children, so to speak. But the one thing that there was one episode in particular where I think Hiram will agree with me on this, where we were talking to Bob Olson, who's at Anchor. And it was a great conversation. He's been a longtime supporter of ATLIS, a longtime, supporter of here at MKA. We've worked with them, in the past. And it was a statement that we made, and we kind of dug in on a little bit in that conversation, and then following up with our conversation with Tim Fish, was that education, you always hear education is not enterprise. And one of the things that Bob said that really stood out to me is you're like, yeah, because it's harder. And that was one of the things that really, in terms of all the episodes, and when you think about all the guests and all the things that we've talked about, and you think of the diversity of ideas and topics that we talk about, that's what makes it harder, is that we need to be fluent. We need to be conversational in all of those areas, because that's the job. And if you're in enterprise, if you're in corporate someplace, you've got your manual, you've got your things that you can follow. You've got everything that you've got scripts that you can follow. You've got software that you're going to use. You can say yes or no to certain things. You've got certain compliance things, which we have to deal with all of those. And then we have to deal with all of those things that the fourth grader brought to us, and that the teacher who needed that tool to get through COVID brought to us. And, all of those other things. And I think I'll go back to what I said originally about giving back to the community, because it is hard. because there is so much. It's what I value so much about these conversations. It's what I value with any of the conversations I have with any of you is what am I learning? What are we sharing? What are we giving back? And that conversation with Bob, where we dug in on that, I think was the one thing that if I was going to have anyone listen to anything that we do, in the different aspects of our school, I'd want them to hear that statement, because I think that carried so much weight, at least for me. And I think it carries weight for others, just in terms of the work that we're doing, the value that we bring, the service that ATLIS provides and that you guys provide, by doing these things. I think it's just it really resonated with me.
Can I share a quick story? And of course I'm just going to move on and do it anyways, and you guys can cut it out later. But so you guys know that I ran a Linux 1-to-1 program at one of my schools, right? Whitfield School in St. Louis. And we got invited to the Global Linux Collaboration Summit, right? Where all the open source rock stars and all the open source projects all come together. And I was on a panel with the director of computing for Citroën Peugeot, the auto manufacturer, who had I think 25,000 Linux workstations in their environment. And then the other person on the panel was the CIO of the German air traffic controllers, who had about 70,000 Linux desktops around, right? And I had 600 Linux laptops, right? Compared to all those. And it was a panel discussion, and there's probably about 300 Linux developers, leaders out there. And they started asking questions, peppering us with questions about how users use desktop and all that kind of stuff. But almost all of the questions came to me. And when I got the question, I'd answer it, and then I'd toss it to my colleagues. And the questions just kept coming back to me. And at the end of the panel, I said, guys, I'm sorry. I don't understand why all those questions are coming to me. You guys run these massive installations. And both of them looked at me and said, it's because your job is so much harder than ours. And so, Bill, they said the exact same thing, right? They understood, in enterprise, everyone has a role, and computing also has a role. But in education, every device is expected to support an artist, a scientist, a writer, an investigator, right? All of these things have to be done and supported on every device by technology leaders in schools. And so it is a ridiculous, and with anywhere from generally about 1/5 the staff of our enterprise colleagues as well. Hiram, what's your favorite episode?
I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation we had with Matt Scully, mainly because I'm trying to figure out how to get past HR when I make the statement that his mother made to him, which was that you're not good looking enough to be useless. And so
Bob says the same thing to me all the time.
and so the wisdom of a parent to be able to say that to their child with just extreme earnestness, and for Matt to be able to just share wholeheartedly how he works out at Providence Day, how he used to hide in his office with the lights closed, reading the manuals so that he could figure out how to restart a switch. I just loved that podcast, and it was the true essence of the types of sharing that goes on within ATLIS in terms of being a resource. And I am also so thrilled to hear that he's one of 3 Pillar Award winners for this coming year. And so that was one of my favorite episodes. And I must say, doing these with Christina, it is no doubt she is the queen of this. She totally gets it. She's wonderful at it. But I never see Bill enough. And so when I have the opportunity to hang out with Bill when we're not texting with Jason Ramsden or Barry Kallmeyer, this is just a treasured moment in my day when I get to hang out with Bill, because Bill is the quintessential sharer. He's got his fingers in so many pies. He is answering on listservs all the time. He's writing his own blog posts, and yet he still has the time to text you to see how you're doing.
Yeah. And I think that it's cool because our community enjoys having access to you guys too. Alex and Bob, I don't know what you guys hear in terms of feedback about your podcast, but the couple of comments that I get over and over again, first of all, people really like the chemistry between myself and Bill and Hiram. I think mainly because they consider me the adult in the room. And there's always a little bit of an element of like, is she going to keep them under control on this episode or not? So we get a lot of comments about our chemistry, which I love. It's really my favorite coffee date of the week is when we record. I love it. But we also are getting some cool energy from our community. So I want to pivot to that and talk about that a little bit too. One thing that I made, I'll offhanded, I'll make these offhanded comments during the podcast, but then my brain hasn't fully caught up to the fact that they live then in eternity. So we were talking one day about monitor setups, and that became this whole thing on social media because I said in a podcast, oh, we should have a show me your monitor competition on LinkedIn, right? And then my staff suddenly has like an actual show me your monitor setup, and there's like rules, and we're giving something away, and there's a whole thing. So I think that's a cool part of a podcast is that even though it seems to be a closed conversation when we record them, once we let them out into the wild, they're out there and people can have this, multi-way conversation back with us. It may be a little asynchronous, but I think it's, again, more real time and more organic because we can keep this communication going, whether it be on social media or just when we run into people. I think they feel like they're getting to know us and the things that are important to us. So that kind of community has been really cool on our side anyway.
And how about Jeff Dayton with the quad monitor setup at Madeira? I thought I had him beat with 3, and then all of a sudden he shows up doing with his day trading apparatus it was just unreal.
I mean, I knew that was going to be a throwdown. I knew that like as soon as Jeff Dayton dropped that, I was like, oh, Hiram's going to flip. It was hilarious. I think he's leading the race.
I think you still have him beat with like the total number of monitors in the room. It might not be on your desk, but I think you've got him beat with the number of monitors in the room, if I remember correctly.
I think you're right there. I think you're right.
We had another ATLIS member, Daryl Loy, was presenting in our at our collaborator conference. We had a virtual conference about a week or so ago, and he shares shares a photo of his. Basically, he set up a studio for himself for his sessions and his work, where he had not only a big screen interactive panel showing multiple screens of what all was going on, but he had multiple screens set up in front of him, and he had an interactive panel behind so that he could like do a weatherman's report while he was talking. It was, and he had a 2-camera operation along with his mic, and I had a huge switcher next to him. I was like, okay.
So, Alex, when are they delivering all of your stuff so that you can match that setup? Because after I saw that, yes, the order went in right then. Right? Amazon delivers for you, right?
I'm just going with the vision, the Apple Vision, and I'll just be pinching and poking and like walking around. I won't need it because I'll have them all like virtually within. So I don't know how you'll count that, but that's my next step.
We did end up with posters from an offhand comment. So there are learning through technology posters. Apparently, Sophia takes some of the things I say a little too seriously. And then my daughter's like, I need one of those. And now there's posters. It's like people want posters. They don't realize that Alex and I are on them, I assume. So once they get them, they will change their mind, I suspect.
I mean, in that vein, you guys were just talking about how you have you have learning through technology swag, water bottles. And now I feel like we're dropping the ball. Hiram and Bill, we need to have a conversation around some talking technology swag. Like, I'll make sure we have something for our event in Reno, but we got to figure out what we want to have be our podcast swag.
We got a good logo. I think we can do it.
Oh, no problem. No problems.
You need a Sophia.
That's right. I do need a Sophia. She can help pick our swag. So we have an ATLIS conference. Our annual conference is coming up. And I know we wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit because as we talk about this community that we're capturing through our podcasts, there's also this valuable, important community that comes together in our industry event. ATLIS, try again. Alex, you've been an incredible supporter of ATLIS for a long time and a big proponent of our conference. And I will say, having represented other industries in other association leadership roles, I was surprised myself, coming into the ATLIS community. It is so warm and so positive. And when we hire people at ATLIS who come on the staff, we're always like, just wait till you meet them. Like, wait till you go to the conference. It's such an incredible, warm, sharing group of people. It's really kind of unique. I'm sure everybody says that about their events and about their community, but the, technology educators and technologists that support education, it really is a very unique and special community.
I think the biggest reason I've been a supporter for ATLIS as long as you guys have been around, because I think it's an organization that was overdue and needed, right? And then when ATLIS was founded, I was still an independent school tech director. So I was directly benefiting from ATLIS as an ATLIS member, while having also been the co-founder of Educational Collaborators, was an ATLIS sponsor, right? So I got to wear two hats with the organization, and I am, through Educational Collaborators, I also feel deeply tied to the ATLIS community, and even though it's an association, it is, as you said, Christina, it's a community even more than it is an association, and your two co-hosts on the show, they work as collaborators and Educational Collaborators, right? Many of the Pillar Award members, and I keep mine, it's just a little out of the shot, but I keep my ATLIS Pillar Award right on my desk, close behind it, so that whenever I'm on a conference call, I can see it. My organization, Educational Collaborators.
Show us your pillar. Is that what's next? Not show us your monitor. Show us your pillar. That's awesome.
Show us your pillar. It's just these are my people, right? Like your community are my people, and I feel like they're people, right? And so it's a great synergy. I've always enjoyed the conference as well, just because it is, like you said, so much a community. We did a podcast recently. Actually, our most recently released one was with Christine Feenstra, who's the executive director of Q. And I would say on the public school side, that's the closest competitor to ATLIS in terms of a community feel, right? And that it just makes all the difference. Your organization is a community that is there to support and help people, and the people who go through your leadership programs, and the people who attend your conference, and the people who go to your cybersecurity workshops, they stay connected with your community. Every touch with ATLIS is a deepening of a relationship, not just another transaction of knowledge. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah, our conference is coming up soon, and maybe this will even be posted after the fact. I'm not sure, but there's just so much energy around it. Bill and Hiram, I know you guys have obviously been long time, come to the conference type people, but specifically about the community, either through the podcast or through the event that we're talking about, just any opportunity that we have to connect with each other seems to be like a winner. Like, you can't go wrong. If you put technology people together in the education space, like, good things happen.
No, it's definitely, one of the hallmarks of the organization. I think, when I think about, like, when we have problems here, when we have questions here, one of the things I always ask my colleagues is, if we don't know, who have you reached out to? Where have you gone? Have you posted it to, ATLIS, to the community board, to see what you can get out of the group? Because it's the best opportunity to hear from people who are trying to do the same things you are and struggling with the same problems and questions and need similar answers, to really pull it all together. And you're gonna get the good, bad, and the ugly. You're gonna hear all sides of it. You know what I mean? You'll have people that'll say, this worked great and I loved it. And others that'll say, yeah, not quite so much for me. And you know what I mean? You're going to get all sides of it. And it's not just going to be, because you can post on LinkedIn, you can post in different places, and you can get, vendors coming back that may be very well intentioned, but there's also, they're trying to pitch their product to solve your problem. And you may need that. And that may be the most helpful thing that you can get out of that. But you also need those differing opinions, those differing ideas, When we said this was hard, one of the reasons it's hard is because we're all working with constrained budgets. So, being able to find the easiest, the best, and the most economical way to do things is really, one of the things I take out of the organization as much as I hopefully put back into it. So it's been great for developing that and building that.
Attention, all educators. Are you struggling to manage communications across your district? Introducing Rise Vision, the easy-to-use solution for all of your digital signage needs. With our user-friendly software and support for any hardware, you can effortlessly keep your school community informed. Say goodbye to hours of content creation with our amazing templates. Over 500 to choose from, along with integrations and weekly recommendations. Plus, enjoy the best service with free training and fast support from our knowledgeable team. And here's the best part. Our affordable pricing saves you hundreds, with transparent options designed specifically for schools. Rise Vision is now offering hardware as a service options, the Rise Vision Media Player and R Series display. Transform your school's communications today with Rise Vision.
So, that you sort of bring up what is in some ways kind of the paradox of Bob and I's roles, right? So we do our podcast to share our insights, discoveries, and amazing people with our community. But the other part is we're also vendors, right? And so we are sponsors of the ATLIS conference, Educational Collaborators and STS Education, and who sponsors our podcast, and Bob's group EduTech, and the reason we're there, and really the reason why we prioritize that is because we serve your community. Right? Like Educational Collaborators, we work and EduTech, we work with publics and privates, but those independent schools are the needs that they have. Bill, you mentioned we're all budget constrained, but we have needs. And we believe that, the kinds of services that we bring to the marketplace are really aligned very well with the kind of membership that you have. And, and it also sort of, represents your membership represents a large, significant portion of our existing customer base.
I would also say that those, because Hiram and I being one of them, those people that represent Educational Collaborators represent that community as well because it's an organization, it's a company that's based on taking community members and bringing their services to bear and their knowledge to bear in other areas. So it really serves similar purposes in terms of leveraging the power that the community brings to bring resources. And even though in the comment mentioning where vendors what they bring into these different things, there's a lot of value that's there. And the one thing I have found is that the vendors that support ATLIS, support it to a core level that I think in independent schools, a lot of people don't understand the private school world the way, because everyone is kind of unique and they understand that uniqueness, and they're not
why we're independent schools, right?
Exactly, but finding people that you can work with that understand that difference, that understand the language and the vocabulary that's used. Just simply coming in and not talking about, who's your superintendent and principal, when it has no bearing on anything that we use in independent schools. Having those relationships, understanding the community and putting that community first, I think is the benefit of both.
So if I could flip that for a second, that actually triggers an interesting kind of line of conversation. Alex and Bob, you guys work with both. So what would you say are the similarities right now between public and private schools? I mean, we swim in our independent private school lane, but what are some of the things like high level that we're grappling with that are really similar that you guys observe?
I think actually this will sound odd from the engineer, right? I think they're grappling with what role technology should play in schools. Everything from, we read every day about students. As a parent, I read about how my daughter shouldn't spend as much time in front of a screen, yet we send them to school where they're going to spend a great deal of time in front of a screen. And we hear about the future of AI and how we're going to live our lives and our children are going to live their lives in a world of AI. But yet we don't really quite know how to handle AI in schools yet. And we aren't maximizing its potential for teachers, but we're also not teaching our students yet how best to handle it. So I think the whole role, I don't want to go on and on, but I think the whole role of technology is still something we're getting our arms around when we got flooded with it in COVID. And now we're still public, independent, charter. We're still kind of figuring that out. But I'm sure Alex will have. Alex and I kind of agree on stuff. But what do you think, Alex?
Particularly on this stuff, we agree. And honestly, when you're talking about the classroom, I don't think there's a ton of differences between what's happening in public and private education. There really is it all starts with an incredible caring teacher. And when you've got an incredible caring teacher, that dynamic is all about whoever happens to be in that room at that particular time. And I think that is true kind of across all realms of education. Where some of the differences lie to your question, Christina, are I think a little bit more on the staffing and the infrastructure side. And both of those are related to scale. And so the numbers are larger in public school than they are in independent school, with very few exceptions. There's a handful of independent schools that rise to the same size as small districts, but even a medium-sized district is much larger than a large independent school. And so public schools in general have a lower staffing ratio as a ratio of full-time employees to devices and or students than the independent schools do. And so how they think about systems and how they think about both human systems and digital systems and operations, those are different. And of course, technology can really serve that, right? And so serve in terms of scale and limitations and productivity, right? And so I think with our public school clients, we spend a little more time thinking about those kinds of things. But the biggest difference when it comes to the classroom, Bill, I think you nailed it. It's language, right? Independent schools want to know that you talk their language. Public schools also want to. Charter schools run pretty differently. They use executive director instead of like head of school or superintendent. And so they want to know that you know who they are, so that those nuances that make a difference are addressed. And just to add a little color to something you said earlier, Bill, when Educational Collaborators is working with a client, our approach, our methodology might be fundamentally the same across public, private, and charter, or parochial even. But the people that we assign to the projects are people who have experience in those communities, right? And so they know the language and they know the nuances that exist between them. But in terms of fundamentals, all about the connection between students and other students and students and that teacher. And that I think is fairly universal.
So one of the things that generally happens on our podcast, and I know with yours as well, you guys ask a standing question. I tend to change the question up a lot. All right. So in the past, I've asked about, what was your first job? Back in the early days, I think that always is a demonstration of character. I've asked, what device could you not live without? Because I happened to have left the office one day to run to the post office and I forgot my phone. And I was like in the car in like dead silence going, what do I do with myself? I've also asked what your soul city is. Everybody has a soul city. And weirdly, I think we finally nailed why Hiram and Bill and I have such great chemistry, because we all pick Seattle. So we've had different questions along the way. And so I think that my random question today is going to be a little bit out of left field, but I want to know, when you are interested to feel a connection with other humans, where do you go? In other words, it could be a hobby, but it also could be a social media site. So when you are just like feeling like you need to connect with people on more like a daily basis, not like a get on a plane and come to the ATLIS conference basis. But for me, my example is that many of you know that I sing a cappella harmony in my personal life. And so I'm just thinking about this because yesterday, you can tell my voice is a little fried. I was traveling last week for NBOA, NAIS. I'm not feeling the best with allergies, but I had chorus rehearsal. And my husband's the director. My youngest daughter is in the chorus with us. My mom's in the chorus. It's my community. And so even though I didn't feel well or feel my best, it's where I go for my people. And it's where I go for my interaction. And so my question for you is, when you need people, when you need humans, whether real life or virtual, where do you go?
Should I answer, Alex, that that never happens for me. I never feel an overwhelming desire to be with people.
All right,
No,
Bob. Okay, I'm going to give you actually an alternate because I can tell that you're our introvert here.
I could answer it, but may I choose like Monty Hall behind door number 1 and door number 2? Like, do you want to answer this, or do you want to?
You can shape it however you want, or maybe it's like, where do you go to get a dog or a cat hit? Like, if you don't want humans, what brings you joy?
Well, my dog does. My dog Wilbur is a rescue, and he does indeed, as does our family. I do enjoy being around our family. Our girls are all over the place. They're both 16, so they drive, and we don't ever see them. And Aiden is in college, and so he only comes home intermittently. But I do enjoy walking with my dog to relax. But I do. There are. It'll sound odd. This might be the most introverted answer ever. I compete in Taekwondo and I compete in race cars. So I like being. Those are my relaxing people. So I go and get in a race car by myself to be around people, or I get onto a mat and I punch and kick people. Those are my people. But that's my answer. That you get what you get. I guess. That's right. A whole episode on what's wrong with Bob.
Bob, I love it. You know what? I'm married to an introvert and I get it. Sometimes the best thing in the world is if I say, honey, do you want to go to a movie by yourself? He loves it.
Bob, all I can tell you is that those 2 skills will serve you well driving in New Jersey. The race car driving and the Taekwondo skills. I think you can put the 2 of them together, and that you're the quintessential Jersey driver.
It's good to know that my unique combination of introvertedness, physical aggression, and speed serve me somewhere.
Yeah, it serves you in New Jersey.
Now on to the regular people and their answers. Bill, you spoke up.
No, I would probably say one of the places that I go, though, depending on where I am in my roller coaster ride, would be the gym. I go to the gym. It's been a place where, over the years, regardless of where I've been in my life, whether I'm going with my family or my wife or my friends or whatever it would be finding that place where you can go and just, everyone's there and they're getting something out. They're either trying to work out, they're trying to get some frustrations out, they're trying to do what they can do. I go to a very kind of close knit gym where I can be me, and often, I am me, and I know that when the owner of the gym, who I'm very good friends with, would bring in new people, he'd be like, well, and this is Bill, and Bill comes with the gym, and you have to get used to Bill, and here he is, and no, but it's definitely it's definitely one of those places where you can kind of just let it all out, and you need that in your life every once in a while. You need to just to be able to go in and lift heavy things and make loud noises and grunt and just be surly at times and have fun.
Yeah, we don't let him grunt on the podcast.
So most people probably don't realize that I'm actually an introvert extrovert. And so I spend a lot of time at school forging relationships and being around people to make sure everything's going as it should. And sometimes when I get home, the last thing I want to do is also be around people. The only exception is my bride, my daughter, and our dog. And so it's a very peaceful time when we're all home together. I used to be a long distance runner in high school and in college. And so I spent a lot of time by myself on the roads. And so I'm used to that and kind of getting into my thoughts. And they didn't have podcasts back then. I would have loved to have had podcasts back in the day. But that's how I recharge, is when I have an opportunity to be home. My bride is very much an introvert, and as a high school anatomy teacher, there's a lot of work that goes on in trying to keep boys and girls focused on, don't cut yourself with the scalpels, as they're dissecting things. But needless to say, we both enjoy our quiet time together. We'll sit back and watch some TV at the end of the day, and go for some nice evening walks out in the woods with our black lab.
Everybody's got dogs in here. I was also a runner, Hiram, right? Not as good as, I wasn't a college runner like you were, man, but and a good college runner. But I live in Colorado. So like, it's when I need time for myself to unwind, because I do spend a lot of time with people. but it's not always relaxing and recharging. Sometimes I just need to unplug, right? And so Colorado is great for hiking, right? And I choose the difficulty of the hike for how much I want to blind my thinking, right? Like if I want to reflect, I'll take a hike in a forest, right? And not super steep. But if I want to, as you said, Bill, kind of work some things out, but I don't want to think, I just need to like just work out, then I'll do like a summit hike, right? And something that's really steep and hard and all that kind of stuff. But and this is going to really surprise everyone on this podcast, when I want to connect with people, if I'm just looking for a place to just go and chat and connect with people, yes, it is a pub. That is where I will find my friends. Because after a few drinks, everyone lets
Why
go.
does
Whatever
that not
was.
surprise me?
Yeah, right.
My first invitation to meet Alex was at Rum Boogie in Memphis.
I'm pretty sure that Alex tried to poison me with beer at one point because I'm allergic to gluten. So I'm thinking that was you as well. But I see how you connect with people. It's all through.
I feel like I hijacked your question. It all turned about how they get alone, when clearly anybody who's been around Alex likes to be around people. And I can tell Bill and Hiram are exactly the same. So I assume there are those rare occasions when they want to be alone. In Alex's instance, I think it's when his wife tells him, it's time for you to go for a hike. If you think she means go up a mountain, but she really means get out of my way. But we'll let Alex believe what he believes.
But Bob, you want Bill and me, if you're part of the zombie apocalypse, we're your people. We'll take good care of you.
These guys always bring it back to the zombies, dude. We got to keep this on the rails.
Christina, did you give us enough of that one? Of your space?
Oh, yeah, I think so. And so now we can go to kind of the standing traditional question. Who usually asks that on your podcast? Do you guys take turns?
So this question ended up because I was, I think, not the best student. I think that's generous to say I was not the best student. I was mostly an absent student as I got further along into school, but not the best student. But I'll explain my answer in the end. So my question, though, is I believe everybody has a teacher who made an impact on them. So we're going to start with you, Christina. Who was your favorite teacher who made the biggest impact on you?
I will say I have two. I'll make it as quick as I can. One, in high school, I went to a really small rural school in Western New York. And I was pretty awesome at school. I was all right. And I was kind of plowing down this path of I'm going to be a lawyer, or I'm going to, I'm going to be a business person. And I had a sociology, psychology, social studies teacher in my senior year kind of pause and go, wait, what are you majoring in college? You should be a writer. Why aren't you going into, and I'm like, because I need to make money. Like I want health insurance. Like that's why. Small town girl needed to be independent. But Mr. Tom Maimoni was my social studies teacher. And he really said, well, you should go, you're a great writer, do something with that. And it really shifted my mindset. And I still pursued business and communications, but I also added that journalism piece. I also got a degree undergrad in English because I wanted to be well-versed in the canon and just understanding what great writers had done. And so I think a part of my communication skills I really attribute there. But then to follow that up, when I was an adult, I was encouraged to go back to school and get my MBA. And I will tell you that as a writer, English person, I had it in my head that maybe I wasn't the best at math. And so I was really nervous about going back to B school because I didn't know if I could handle the global finance and the statistics and the accounting. As it turns out, I'm actually really, really good at that stuff. And I just had it in my head, probably because of my gender, probably because of the generation in which I grew up, that wasn't a girl thing. And so I just always said, I'm not great at math. Well, I am good at math. I just never did math. And so when I went to my executive MBA program at the Rochester Institute of Technology, there's an accounting professor, Daniel Tassoni, who really saw me. And as it turns out, I did that program with a lot of PhDs and CEOs and doctors, like medical doctors and engineers. And I was second in my class because I knew how to communicate back what I had learned. So even in accounting, even in the math classes, the global finance, I could take that data and digest it and spit it back. But I needed those two individuals, Mr. Maimoni and Dr. Tassoni, to kind of just look at me and say, I see you, and I see more in you than you see in yourself.
That is awesome. That's a great story. We just finished an episode with an ATLIS board member, Denise Musselwhite, to talk about women in tech, and we addressed some of those biases that sort of statistically exist and how they affect us not only societally but individually, like what you just shared. That's great. Thank you. Our listeners have heard me answer this question before when Bob interviewed me, but for your listeners and for you guys, it was my 9th grade teacher, Mrs. Roper. She was a spectacular English teacher, like Sting, from like the Police. Sting actually wrote a 9th grade English curriculum, and she used that curriculum heavily in our class. And I just thought, how freaking cool is that, right? But my favorite thing that she did that really helped shape kind of my approach to education is, are you guys familiar with the phrase, those who can teach, those who can do, those who can't teach, right? So she had a t-shirt that she wore in when the faculty was kind of in a dispute with the district administration that said, those who can teach, those who can't administrate, right? And so she was totally thumbing her nose at her bosses, right? And she was willing to do so at her own peril because of her care for what she felt was right for the students, right? And so that woman shaped me. And in fact, for a long time, our slogan at Educational Collaborators was those who can teach. And it comes straight from her t-shirt. So Mrs. Roper was great on that. Hiram, share yours.
So my teacher was Mr. George Duffy, and I actually had him for chemistry and for physics, but he was also my high school track coach. So Kings Park High School on Long Island did not have essentially much of a team. We were just a handful of guys, and George Duffy, particularly by the time I got to be a junior, he went ahead and would pick me up at my house and drive me to meets all over Long Island, New York City, Schenectady, the Penn Relays. And when I was being recruited to run in college, he was instrumental in convincing me to take a serious look at the College of William and Mary. He was recruited to play football there and soon realized that he wasn't big enough to play football there. But he said, Hiram, of all the schools that are interested in you, you really, really have to take a long, hard look at the College of William and Mary. It was really quite fascinating because in 2001, he came down to Williamsburg to participate, to be a part of a celebration when I was inducted into the William and Mary Athletic Hall of Fame. And I wasn't even sure if he was going to make it. And I spoke about him there. And there he was in the audience, because so much of what he did for me, not only to teach me chemistry and physics, because I'm a science guy by nature, is he really taught me the value of hard work. And he was going to hold me accountable through and through. One quick story. I was finishing a race and I thought I had this in the bag, was going to win the county meet. And I put my hands up and I got beat at the tape. And the guy came out of nowhere, never even saw him coming. And from that moment on, whenever I ran 400s for practice, it was 410 meters for practice. And that was where my time was being recorded. He said, you are never going to stop at the finish line ever again. You're going to run through that finish line. And for the better part of 18 months into my junior and senior year, that's what I had to do. I ran 410 meters. So I am who I am today, mainly because George Duffy was an instrumental part of guiding me to get to the college, and I am who I am. So I thank you, George.
You didn't know that he was in the audience when you were being inducted?
I had a feeling he was gonna try and make it, and then all of a sudden, sure enough, there he was. I saw him when I was actually speaking.
Wow, that's awesome. I think we would all wish to have the opportunity to share back with those teachers these moments. That's great. So, Bob, you actually asked the question, but answer it for it.
I did. So our listeners have heard the story of Miss Parrish and Mr. Wampum, both English teachers, not an English guy. Ones and zeros, numbers, science, that's my thing. Miss Parrish just saw that I didn't learn the way everybody else did, that I had a great deal of potential to learn, but I just couldn't learn the way everybody else did. And she engaged me in that. Mr. Wampum, on the other hand, was this smallish guy who dressed perfectly and not most people's kind of guy, but everybody liked him. In the words of the secretary in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, they all thought he was a righteous dude. In Mr. Wampum, he was good. But Christina, you made me think about talking about college. I found myself running a business here. So several years ago, I thought I need to go and learn something about business. So I enrolled to get a degree, a bachelor's degree in business. I wanted to get an MBA, and they looked at me and went, "Bob, you had one economics course when you were studying engineering. You're going to need a lot more before they let you in for doing an MBA." So I pursued or I looked into a degree, and Cindy Wilson was the executive director of the program and one of my instructors. And she constantly reminded me that I could do this and that I was smart enough and that I had the dedication to do it. And it worked out. I got the degree. Cindy, I'm going to have to send her a link to this podcast because I don't think she understands how great it was that she was there to encourage me and to let me know that I had what it took to go back to college while working full time and running a business and being a dad and all the other things that you do. So that's my answer. And I think, Alex, all three of these sound like people who knew right off the bat who the people were. So that's 3 more for Bob. You can explain why that matters.
Yeah, this one's not counting for me at all. But for the record, we did send him the question in advance. Bob and I, were the first time we shifted to this, the bet on the table was, would the guest know off the top of their head who their favorite teacher was? And Bob's wager was that they would, and my wager was that they would have to think for a minute and sort of pull out that best teacher. And that was the only official time that the bet was actually levied, and I won that one. Just saying, Bob.
Let's see if maybe Bill will break your streak. Bill, you're not allowed to say your wife. So who's your favorite teacher?
Well, I'll go sappy then, and I'll say both my parents were teachers, so I'll say it was my parents.
Oh,
No. But
were you their student? Were you in their classes? Your parents' classes?
Sort of, kind of. My mom ran a daycare in our basement. I don't know whether that counts, but no, I was never. Yeah, I don't think you ever could be a true student of one of your parents. I don't think that was allowed. That was. But no, I can tell you that it's a very easy question. And it was my 3rd grade teacher, Nancy Brushkin. And it was one of those things, even before she was my teacher, she was my favorite teacher. Because one of the things that I would draw on was in our last conversation with Tim Fish, last episode that we aired, he talked in there about, students being seen and known. And he talked about, this next piece of feeling, but going that extra step and making them feel needed. And that was the thing that Mrs. Brusher always made me feel. She always made me feel needed. She always brought that to the table, regardless of what we were doing. It was like every kid had a purpose and a need that, they was exhibited in some way in the classroom, even in 3rd grade. And I couldn't tell you what those things were. As we're all talking, I'm thinking about to all the different things. But I know that I continued to go back to see her. She continued to be interested in everything that I was doing throughout high school and even into college. And we've kept in touch. We've lost touch recently, to be frank, but we kept in touch for many, many years after I even was, out of the class and out of high school and even into college. And just continually makes and has made an impact. It's why I became a 3rd grade teacher. So it was one of those things that, really drove a lot of where and how I got to where I would be. We all were mentioning college, and I do have one college professor that was probably my least favorite, but made the biggest impact. And she was the head of my program, who actually told me at one point that she never liked me and she never liked my attitude, and I would amount to nothing in education.
Well, Bill, most think that. It's just most don't tell you that.
Yeah,
So,
I know. Yes, exactly. So that was one of those statements that you hear and you're kind of like, okay, let's see where this is going to go. It was like, exactly. And it was literally, it was like, all right, game on. Let's go. Let's see how we're doing here. And, it was, so there are, you learn from the good and the bad, and you move on.
So speaking of moving on, as we start to wrap all this up, I can tell, let's just kind of close things out talking about what's next for each of our podcasts, because I know that as we're sort of getting our sea legs on all of this, we have had some exciting things that we've been, sort of falling into the pattern. We talk to people, we talk to leaders, we talk about, ideas in educational technology. We're going to also add in fun things like this, where we're doing crossover conversations, but also we might record a couple podcasts live when we're at our annual conference. We have some really incredible guests coming up that represent different aspects of diversity in our space. And so we just want to bring in as many voices as possible. And we'll, of course, hit those topics that are really relevant to our listeners. But we also always wanted to maintain a people first kind of energy with our podcast. And so you'll definitely see that moving forward on Talking Technology with ATLIS. So what do you guys have in the hopper? What's coming up for y'all?
I like that Alex is rendered mute. That's so there's so much as we're still learning, like what is going to be new. I think that like with Sophia and Alex and I, we get together after every podcast and they tell me how it went, because I don't listen to myself in a podcast. So they tell me what I have to do differently. And now I get it in real time from Sophia while I'm talking. But I think what we have found, that I have a dear friend who listens to this podcast, has nothing to do with education, nothing at all. But he listens to it while he works out, just like Bill. And he gets that time away and he texts me. If our podcast go out on Wednesday, he texts me Wednesday at noon, because he was working out and listening. And he talks about the interesting people. He always tells me everybody has an interesting story. So I think Alex and I getting better at finding that interesting story is what we need, because it's not always the story that people want to tell. It's not always the interesting story. Now, there are things and maybe Alex has some ideas on that as well. I'm sure Alex has something to say about that. But in addition to that, he may talk more about some of the guests and topics we have lined up. It's all yours now, Alex.
Kudos and ditto to what you just said. But we did a live episode and that was kind of a wild experience from like an audio engineering standpoint. And then it also it's a different kind of dynamic when you're live versus, on a platform like this. We had one of those. We've got a couple of bigger names that we haven't locked in yet, so I don't want to release them yet. But we've kind of got a little bold with some of our asks this season, and so some of those may come out. But I think the one that I am most excited about is we were up at the IETA conference up in Idaho, the Tech Directors Conference up there. And they had an esports tournament going on. And they were playing Rocket League in that tournament. And we had a little Rocket League station in our own booth. And they started to play in our booth. And before it was all said and done, some of our partners came and saw these guys playing. And now we're sponsoring these kids with Lenovo equipment, esports gaming equipment, and helping to facilitate some conversations with them in colleges about esports as a way to help fund their college experience. And there's 3 guys on the team. One wasn't even considering college because financially it wasn't even something that he could think about. And now he's the best on their team. And now he's talking to colleges about this. And so the student esports episode that's coming up, I can't wait to record that. That one's going to be a ton of fun.
That's really great. Well, this has been a ton of fun. It was so cool to kind of just hang out as podcasters for a few minutes. I hope you guys had fun. It was a real pleasure for us.
Yeah, it was great. Thanks so much for having us. And we've been doing, like, the reason this was so important to us to do this specifically with you guys is our parent company and, EduTech, Educational Collaborators, and STS, we've all been, we're focused this year particularly on growing our number of charter and independent school accounts, because we have found that now that we kind of understand who we are across our 4 companies better, we realize we really are a fit for that kind of community. And so we're really trying to spend a lot of our time and energy and focus on, on your community, because it's who we want to be with, right? So it's who we've sort of built ourselves to be with. So thanks for letting us be on your show.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Have a great day. It's been awesome. Happy recording.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Wow, Alex. I thought I didn't get to talk a lot in our podcast, but man, add a couple of more Alexes. Now I get why they're your people. ATLIS is you. You are ATLIS. It actually makes me want to go now. It makes me want to be at the conference. I've tried the last 2 years. I had flights canceled one year. Then last year we sent somebody who is prettier and smarter than me. So
your
maybe
wife?
the third,
Yes.
yeah, there is that. So the third time might be the charm, but I totally understand all of this that you've talked up ATLIS. I get it now. So it's just here in a few weeks. What's it going to be like for you?
Oh, I mean, that conference to me is like a homecoming, right? It's like a family reunion. On the show, we talked about the community associated with ATLIS and how it is pretty rare. And I feel that. And in the episode, we talked a little bit about how connected I was to that community even before sort of ATLIS came to be. But these are just remarkable that their membership is comprised of so many remarkable EdTech leaders. And, when we talked about our conference episode, I talk about how much I learn when I'm just out of the sessions, just talking with people. And that is like the conference that sort of pops into my head, I think more than any other, when I think about how much I learn in the hallways is ATLIS. It's a great organization that just gives so much to its community from its community,
And now what podcast will you be listening to after you listen to ours?
Well, I hope I have listened to several episodes, and I hope our audience finds a way to listen to Talking Technology with ATLIS. They really do have some excellent interviews on that show, and they get under the covers, and not only are you learning a lot about their topic, but you really learn a lot about the people on each of their shows, well, from an interpersonal level. And it's just fun and interesting. So just good people who, the kind of people who have chosen to commit their entire career to supporting schools and students. Yeah, you can't do much better than that in terms of people.